In this video, we're going to talk about diatonic scales and key signatures. A diatonic scale is a group of 7 notes that includes 5 whole steps and 2 half steps within one octave. That is, a scale beginning and ending on the same note, just an octave apart. There are a number of different diatonic scales that we use in Western music, but in this video we're going to talk about the 2 most common, the major scale and the minor scale. Now, a major scale has the half steps and whole steps in the following pattern: whole step, half, whole, whole, half. If you're familiar with solfege, it's the solfege pattern starting on do and ending on do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The cool thing about this pattern is that it sounds the same no matter what note you start on, as long as you keep the same whole step and half step pattern. Now, if you look at the example on your screen, the D major scale, if we start on D and end on D, we have to use a few accidentals in order to accommodate that whole, half, whole, half pattern. As you can see, we need an F sharp and a C sharp. Using accidentals to create this major scale is important, and I want you to remember that when we start talking about key signatures in just a moment. The other diatonic scale we're going to talk about today is the natural minor scale. There's also the harmonic minor and the melodic minor, but for today's purposes we're just going to talk about the natural minor. It has the following pattern: whole step, half step, half step, whole, whole. So as you can see, we've just changed the location of the 2 half steps in this scale. Again, we're starting on D and ending on D, and in order to accommodate the pattern we need for this scale, we need to use B flat. Okay, again, remember that we have to use those accidentals in order to accommodate the whole step and half step pattern. Now, key signatures. Key signatures are that group of sharps or flats that you see at the beginning of your music that lets you know what scale you're working with, or what's commonly known as what key you're in. And the whole point of these key signatures is to tell you which accidentals you need to use to make this major or minor scale based on whichever note you're starting or ending on. Okay? So this right here is kind of a graphical representation of all of those things. Okay, this is called the circle of fifths. And the circle of fifths can give you a lot of information. It can be a little confusing when you look at it at the first time, so I'm going to kind of walk you through it. Okay, as you can see, on the outside ring we have all of our key signatures. We go through the sharp key signatures on the right side, the flat key signatures on the left side. We have the enharmonic key signatures here on the bottom. Enharmonic notes we'll talk about in a different video. The second ring shows you all the major keys, and the inner ring shows you the minor keys. And we'll talk about the relationship between these major and minor keys in just a moment. Now, if you go around the circle in a clockwise manner, you travel up by fifths: C to G, G to D, D to A, and so on. And these you progress to the sharp keys. You add 1 sharp, or then remove a flat if you make it all the way around the other side. If you go counterclockwise, you go down by fifths, and you add flats, or remove sharps if you make it to the other side. That's why this is called the circle of fifths. Now, you'll notice as we travel along the circle of fifths, down the right side or clockwise, we add 1 sharp each time. Now again, that means, for example, if we look at E major, in order to get that whole, half, whole, half pattern that we need for the major scale, we need F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp to make that happen, starting and ending on E. And the same thing with the flat side. If we go over here to E flat, we notice that we need B flat, E flat, and A flat so that we can make that pattern work. Okay. Now you also see here, as I mentioned before, minor keys listed on the inside, and you'll notice that there are minor keys and major keys that share a key signature. These are called relative keys. So for example, B minor is the relative minor of D major. You could also say that D major is the relative major of B minor. You choose which way you say that kind of based on which key you're starting in. If your piece starts in D major and then moves to B minor, you say it's moving to the relative minor. Conversely, if it starts in B minor and then moves to D major, you say it's moving to the relative major. Now I'm going to show you a few easy tricks to remembering your key signatures. Of course, the best way to remember your key signatures is just to memorize them, and you'll do that eventually as you use them day to day in your own personal playing. However, if you haven't quite memorized them yet, these are a few ways you can easily figure out what key you're in. If we look at the sharp keys, okay, the easiest way to tell which key signature you are in is to find the sharp that is the furthest to the right. Okay, so if we're in this, looking at this key signature, that furthest to the right sharp is G sharp. Now you simply step up one letter name from G to A, and there you have it, you're in A major. Okay, this works in all the sharp keys. Our last sharp here is A sharp, so we step up and we find B major. Now if we look at F sharp major, our last sharp is E and we step up to F. Well, isn't that F major? No, F is sharp in this key signature, so it becomes F sharp major. Now, when we're looking at the flat keys, there are kind of two ways that you can remember. First way is you can find the last flat and go down a fourth. So for instance, we have B flat in this key signature right here. If we step down a fourth, B, A, G, F, F is our key signature, F major. If we go to this key signature, our last flat is A. Let's step down 4, A, G, F, E. But wait a minute, it's not E major, it's E flat major because E is flatted in this key signature already. That same principle applies to both sharp and flat keys. Now the other way that we can do this for the flat keys, especially if you have lots of flats, is find your last flat, the furthest to the right, and go one flat backwards, and that is the name of your key signature. So in this instance, we go all the way to the end and we have G flat. We step one flat back, D flat, and that's our key signature. The same thing works right here. We step back one flat, that's B flat. Our key signature is B flat major. Now hopefully you have a better understanding of major and minor scales, key signatures, and why key signatures are necessary.